Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the last Good Employment Charter of 2020. Today we're talking about age-friendly employment, and as usual, before we start, just a bit of housekeeping. For those of you who are new to our webinars, things work best when you're working on the Chrome browser. So if you are trying to view this on another browser, maybe just cut and paste the link and pop it into a Chrome browser, and hopefully you'll have a good experience with Chrome. On the right hand side of the platform, you will see that we have a chat as well as questions tabs. Please populate the chat function or the chat bar. We use these events in place of networking events. Goodness, seems an awful long time ago that we actually met in person now. But when we met in person, the majority of the time we actually spent talking to each other. So please try and use that chat function just to catch up with colleagues and let them know you're there. If you have any questions for the panel as we go through the presentations, pop them in the question bar. They will be sent through to me and I can put them to the panel. Finally, on housekeeping, as always, we will record our webinars, and it will then be available on our YouTube channel and on our website quite soon thereafter after today. So if you miss any content, you can always go back and look at it then, or if you want, you can share it with colleagues. I believe it was Benjamin Franklin that said, "Nothing is certain but death and taxes." But I think there's not much we can do about the march of time. And oh my God, haven't we aged this year? Anyway, demographics tell us that the aging workforce will become an increasingly important aspect of our economy moving forward. And good employment practice dictates that we need to recognize and adapt to this progressive change. So we're delighted today to be joined by a really knowledgeable panel to look at the importance of age-friendly approaches to employment and how you as employers can ensure your employees aged 50 plus, I include myself in that, are supported and valued equally. So can I welcome and introduce our panel? First of all, we've got Kim Chaplain. Kim is the Associate Director for Work and at the Centre for Aging Better. Hi, Kim. How are you? We're also joined by Stuart Lewis, who's the founder and CEO of Rest Less. According to your website, Stuart, you're the UK's fastest growing digital community for the over 50s. Look forward to hearing more about your work in this space. And finally, we're joined by Rachael Parr, who may well be known to some of our members and supporters. Rachael is Director of Human Resources at Electricity North West. And of course, Electricity North West was one of the Charter's founder members. So welcome, Rachael. It's been too long since you became a member to get you onto one of our sessions. We were also going to be joined today by Hannah Scriven from GMCA. Hannah was going to tell us about a toolkit that GMC are developing and will hopefully publish and launch in the new year. Unfortunately, Hannah's been taken ill today, so can't join us, but I believe Kim will cover much of the content that Hannah was going to deliver, and I'll certainly pick up issues around the toolkit and how we can promote that towards the end of the time together. So without further ado, Kim, over to you, and let's set the scene for this webinar. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm delighted to be here again. Last time I saw you or spoke to you all was the last time I was actually allowed out, which is February this year. It's really great to be back to talk to you again about age-friendly employment. What I'm going to do is talk a little bit about us as an organisation, the Centre for Aging Better, a little bit about what we think is happening to older workers as a result of COVID and the changes to the labour market. And then I'm going to touch on the toolkit that we're working on as well. And it's slightly out of order, but if we can come back in the chat to explore any more stuff in detail, that would be great. So let's go. Centre for Aging Better. is our What Works organisation. We're funded by an endowment lottery from the an endowment from the community lottery, and our purpose really is to look at aging, the process of aging, with the aim of ensuring that as many people as possible have a better later life. And our target group, particularly in this conversation, is looking at people that are age 50 to state pension age, and actually a little beyond sometimes, because actually people in their 70s are in the labour market, and looking at actually how the labour market should function and what their place is in order that their later life is improved. And work is really, really important. Pension savings are really important. But actually the process of work and the social aspects of work are also really important. There are a lot of aspects in terms of how work contributes to that better later life. We always express our objectives in this petal diagram. So in terms of fulfilling work, you can see there, we do focus on affordability and wages, but we also look at health and we look at social connections as well. So what I want to say first of all is that an elder workforce is your workforce. I think Ian said quite rightly that actually, regardless of all the other things that have happened to us this year, the fact of life is that we as a nation are getting older. There are less young people coming into the labour market, and elder workers do want to work for longer. Not all of them, but a substantial portion of them. And before COVID hit and we started to see lockdown, we saw more elder workers in the labour market than ever before, and we were on track to see that increasing as well. So 1 in 3 workers in the UK are over 50. And an average employee in the UK is now in their 40s. So that is, I mean, there's lots of information on this slide. That is the workforce that we're looking at now, which is really interesting. And it isn't substantially changed by COVID, to be honest. It's really important, though, and we understand that employers value a mixed age workforce. I'm not here to talk about elder workers being more important than younger workers or anything else. Really, diversity and a multi-generational workforce is really, really important. So we do want to take care of elder workers and offer advantage to elder workers where we can to keep them in the labour market because they're part of a team, if you like. You know, it's really important that they don't exit as soon as we're seeing them exit at the moment, because their contribution to the workforce as a whole is really positive. And they are, for a lot of people, the customers of the workforce, customers of the business they work for as well. So we've been working for quite a long time to look at what aspects of employment are of value to elder workers and what are likely to keep the elder workers in the labour market and productive and contributing to GDPR as much as possible. And we have these 5 key criteria. Flexibility is really important. As you get older, flexibility changes. We all know that when people move into having a family, they want to work part-time, and we're quite cognizant about care needs when we're talking about parents. But actually, elder workers can often be squeezed at both ends. They can be involved in childcare, but they can also be looking at looking after their own aged parents. Or they could actually just want to change their work pattern and get a different work-life balance. It is, though, much more difficult at the moment for older workers to open up that conversation. There's a process when we see parents and people coming back from maternity leave, etc. But that whole concept of flexible working needs to be explored more. One of the good things about COVID, though, is that has accelerated that space hugely, and it has pushed a lot of barriers away and a lot of excuses for flexible working, for not going down a flexible work path, away quite quickly. And so it's really interesting now to look at where we have moved to and what we would like to keep of that flexibility. And so we feel very positive that actually one of the plus sides of what we've just been through is that we are very optimistic that we're likely to see more flexibility in the workforce. Age positive hiring, well, recruitment and age bias is really interesting. We're about to publish a report. It'll probably be early in the new year now in a project we call GROW. But that project is looking at age bias in the recruitment process and looking at the process full stop. It is a project that works in 3 phases, but what we're hoping to do is what we intend to do is to focus down on the recruitment process and to share best practice to understand where the niggles and the wrinkles are in that process. Interestingly, we have not just looked at older people involved in recruitment, we've compared age bias with younger people. And some of our reports are really interesting. Well, some of our findings are really interesting because in one particular instance, we are finding that younger workers say they experience age bias more than older workers, which is very interesting. But we also think that employers actually are more cognizant of the age discrimination legislation when they consider younger workers than they are with older. There's a lot of stuff in there. I'm not going to go over the other 4 criteria at this point. I mean, the big thing for me in terms of looking at the charter is that these criteria are embedded in that charter, and our aspiration really is to help you. I've got a bit too quickly on that. Is to help you by providing a toolkit that underpins these criteria and helps you to make progress against them. Now, what Anna was going to talk to you today about is a toolkit. We have that ready to publish, and we were going to publish that. Well, I'm saying we, GMC, were going to publish that. It is your product. However, when we looked at the draft, we were really interested in talking to some employers about the statements in the toolkit and about just to assure ourselves actually that the toolkit itself is relevant to you and we are giving it to you, we're preparing it for you and giving it to you in a format that you find works, and in a format, more importantly, that actually you think will work for other employers. So one of our trustees, Ben Page, actually works for, he's the chief executive of Ipsos Moro, and he has offered to do a piece of work with us looking at the statements in the toolkit. And we are really, really keen to work with a few employers that are on this call just to test that out in the new year, just to make sure that the toolkit is in the language and the messaging works for you. So I would be really grateful and excited if there are some employers on this call who would be interested in picking that toolkit up with us and GMC and just doing that piece of work. It would be honestly very, very helpful to us as an organisation to have that conversation and to hear your views on that piece. And that's all I'm going to say about the toolkit at the moment in time, if that's okay. Just
Kim,
on further.
Kim, just on that, do you are you happy for employers to come straight to you, and we can share your email after the call, and they can come straight to you to volunteer to work with you on the toolkit?
That would be great. It would have been Hannah, but if you come to me, I'll collect, and then and if you're happy to do that, and then Hannah and I will get back in touch. That would be
wonderful. Great. Alternatively, if people just want to put their the names in the chat, if they think they can commit their organisation to working with Kim and Hannah now, that would be great. We can collect them up now, but we can do that afterwards. Thanks, Kim.
Thank you very much. I just very quickly want to just touch on furlough. We did a piece of work in the summer with the Learning and Work Institute, which is on our website if you would like to have a look at it. And that piece of work was just looking at what was happening to the 50-plussers nationally in the COVID lockdown. We've just had a look at that piece again. And what we found was that elder workers were not being as disadvantaged as younger workers, but actually there was like a U-shaped impact curve. So elder workers are not doing too well. And the challenge with elder workers is that if they do leave the labour market, they are more likely, twice as likely, to end up being long-term unemployed as younger workers. What we are getting concerned about is that when we looked at returners, furlough returners in September, we found the elder workers were the people that didn't go back to jobs. And so we are quite worried that in this extension of furlough, there are a lot of elder workers hanging in the labour market, in jobs that actually are not going to be there for them to return to. And the other thing we're quite worried about is that they are likely to be in sectors where there are going to be less jobs in retail. And so they're likely to be people who will need some retraining to move sectors. We don't know this yet, but we're monitoring that situation. And it's something I think that we need to look out to. I think we're going to see quite a bit of churn in the 50-plus group. And that could be a good thing. If you're an importer of skills, I would say that there will be some quite highly skilled 50-plus people that need refresher training to move sector coming onto the market in the spring. But I do think we'll have to jump in and intervene in the market in a positive way. I'll leave that chart there for you, just so you can start to understand, see the age groups and where people are. You'll see the charts. I just want to say one more thing about what we've heard from older workers. And that is that a lot of older workers have really changed their retirement plans, and perhaps not how we would initially expect. So we were worried that actually older workers would opt out of the labour market and maybe pull down their pensions earlier than they planned to, and perhaps be a bit poorer because of that. What we're finding is actually that a substantial chunk of older workers, 1 in 8, have to change their plans because of what's happened this year. But quite a lot of them now feel that they need to work longer because they've seen their pension devalue. And less than we expected are intending to retire early. And we do feel that they potentially are the wealthier group. So we're quite worried that those people that are at the bottom end of the labour market, that are likely to be on the cusp of poverty or in poverty, are really going to be stressed in this next period. And we're going to have to look at some quite substantial interventions to think about how those people will come back to the labour market. So it's an interesting time, and I can't tell you a lot more detail than that at this point, because actually we just don't know. We need to monitor the situation. But I think it's an important time for us to talk to employees as a whole. I think it's very important, if you're downsizing, to talk to all of your labour market and to have a very open conversation about what your organisation is going to look like moving forward and what the jobs are. Because I think our worry as well is that older workers may well assume that there isn't something for them, or actually do the decent thing and think that they should go because younger workers need to work more. That's that flexibility piece, I think, that needs a little bit more thinking about and a bit more open conversation. So in summary then, COVID has disrupted the labour market in quite a few ways. We're very pleased to see the flexibility piece. It's not all bad news. We're quite worried about the level of unemployment that is forecast, although actually it's not as bad as it was forecast to start off with. But the bottom line is the workforce is still ageing. We do have to move forward on the basis that we are going to be employing significantly more people in their 40s, 50s and 60s and even 70s. Longer working lives do mean doing things differently, actually. We need to change our mindset on longer working lives as well. And we need to think about a lot of things more flexible down at different stages in life courses. And actually, we would very much like to see employers starting the conversation way back before our target group in late 30s, early 40s, or even before that, in terms of people's career planning, and start to get people to think about, well, what are they working towards in that third and fourth stage of their working life? So we're really pleased to see that we can see the age-friendly 5 reflected in your charter. And we can see you thinking about that. But we do understand that actually, for a lot of organisations, some support is needed. And we are working, or we have some core toolkits around flexibility. And as I talked about recruitment, we're interested in working up more toolkits because we feel as an organisation we can help in that way. And it would be really, really interesting to us if a group of you would open a conversation with us and we could actually explore that environment of toolkits and support with you so that we can respond to what you really need to be able to move forward with this older workforce. And that's me.
Kim, that's wonderful. Really great overview. Some really interesting information about the trends that are starting to come about. I know we're not quite sure where we're going to end up, but we can start maybe seeing some of the directions of travel, which in some areas are quite scary, aren't they? I particularly have resonance with something you said quite early on in the presentation about the diversity of a workforce. And I mean, that comes across in so many dimensions that we touch on. That diversity of a workforce increases productivity, increases well-being in a workplace, and I think perhaps when we think about diversity, we don't always think of age profile, and I think that's something that I'm sure our employers will take on, and certainly, as you say, that those sorts of discussions are embedded within the charter process and particularly examined through our membership process. Just as instant feedback, it looks like Lee Minchin from Fairfield Environmental is more than happy to volunteer. That's fantastic, Lee. Thank you very much. I think Lee also had a question about the report on age profiling and discrimination. Will that be available publicly, Kim, after it's published?
Yes, it will. We were going to publish it actually next week, and then we decided it was too close to Christmas. So it will be available on our website. There'll be a bit of PR around it, probably for us in February, but it will be available to download on our website.
Wonderful. In terms of toolkits, I say this often, the Charter doesn't produce a great deal, but it curates a hell of a lot. So anything that you want us to promote through our website, through our membership, in terms of toolkits or other resources that can help them become better employers, just please pass them through, Kim. We're more than happy to work with you on that. Great. Now I'll turn to Stuart, who can tell us more about Restless. And I think, Stuart, you might come down to a little bit more of a granular detail.
Yeah, absolutely, Ian. And just to pick up on the point there around diversity, I think one of the things we're passionate about is talking around promoting age diversity as a theme, and the idea of having intergenerational teams working together. I think there's few more diverse opinions, and if you want diversity of thought, which is one of the main benefits of diversity, you get extreme diversity of thought between a 20-year-old and a 60-year-old. And actually, the research shows that it leads to a happier overall workforce. So yeah, the message is all around diversity and thinking where the societal trends are going. Having a focus on age diversity as a D&I strand, actually, I think is something to be considering for sure. Great. So shall I give you a bit of? I'll give you a bit of background about Restless, and then I'd love to talk around linking with transitions. I think COVID has certainly given us one hell of a transition in the last 12 months, and what that kind of looks like on an individual basis, and how I think that we can support the labour market and older workers specifically out of this COVID world. I think starting with Restless, so I set up the business 2 years ago when my father passed away, reflecting on the fact that he'd been retired for 36 years when he passed away, which is fabulous. He had a very long life. He was very fortunate. He worked for the government. He had a final salary pension scheme back in the day, but it came with a whole sense of other challenges around managing purpose, managing well-being. And I remember a number of conversations with him around him talking around how he'd struggled with the transition into retirement, something I'm sure most people can relate to with people they know who've gone through that. So we set up Restless with the aim of helping people manage these transitions. And I think what's clear is that retirement doesn't exist anymore. It's simply unaffordable. There's 3 stages of life where you educate, you work, you retire. It just doesn't exist. So it's all around transition. And this transition point in your mid-50s, 60s, even 70s is, what is my next transition? And I think it draws a really nice parallel with what's going on in the economy right now with COVID. Is what we're seeing is 5 years of transition condensed into five months, really. I could pick any specific industry where you're seeing that transition, and transitions are always hard, but you're just seeing that accelerated at a rate that we've not seen before. And there's so many kind of fascinating societal conversations around this. So again, when you think through the challenges for us over the last 20 years, was perhaps one of life insurance and insuring us against early passing. Now people are having to start thinking about longevity insurance, and how do I ensure I've got the skills necessary to ensure a future career and a future career path, and how do I ensure my money can keep lasting until I might outlive my retirement savings. Again, coming back to the points Kim was making around people are choosing to work longer as a result of COVID because they're more uncertain around their financial futures as well. So what can we do? What can we do about transitions, and how can we help transitions? Like, one example I will use is retail. So retail as a whole, as an industry, sales are up year over year. So retail as a whole has done relatively well out of this. Now, oh my word, there's been some tragic losers in that year, and there's been some unbelievable winners in that year. It's been a tremendous transition, but you've seen jobs in retail and customer-facing retail roles have just been decimated, absolutely decimated. Arcadia and Debenhams were the latest 2 examples of that, and you're seeing a permanent scarring on high street. Conversely, in terms of online digital hiring, in terms of logistics, in terms of warehouse roles, these are surging. But how do you get people from A to B? right? And that is all about transitions, and how can we as employers, how can we as a society help enable these transitions to enable people to get from A to B. And I think one of the things when it comes to transitions that I'm particularly personally fascinated about is this link between age and hierarchy. So Kim was talking around this idea of the age bias survey, and that there is clearly age bias in the recruitment process. But if you look at most FTSE 100 CEOs or most politicians, they're in their 50s, 60s, or 70s. So we're great at respecting age in the workplace when people follow a linear career path. But what happens when people want to transition or choose to transition? The population, so the hierarchy pyramid is like this. The population pyramid is increasingly like this. So what happens to people when they're outside of this, in this growing section, is they often get labelled as overqualified, and that is something that our members on a personal level, almost I hear it universally, people get told they're overqualified, and they're dismissed, and they're kind of handed off a little bit. And when you think something that was news to me, but is quite profound for all of us, is that peak earnings on a median or a mean basis are in our 40s, according to ONS data. So earnings drop when people hit, and this is for full-time work, so it's not mixing part-time, full-time. Earnings drop in our 50s, earnings drop again in our 60s. So you've got a whole swathe of people who fall into that otherwise overqualified bracket. And that, one of the central things I talk around is, how do you embrace that untapped talent pool of really experienced leaders that we'd have running a company, but we have doubts about them running a department? How do you embrace that rather than shunning it? And I think the concerns employers typically have around people in those transitions is that they may be difficult to manage, they may get bored, is something that I hear a lot. But rather than asking or addressing those questions, we put an assumption on someone because of an age, because of a role profile, because of an experience. And the problem with all forms of diversity and inclusion is, as soon as assumptions creep in, you're in trouble, because you're making an assumption about someone because of a characteristic, not because of who they are. And actually, when it comes to age, it's one of the most malleable characteristics that there has ever been. And the government hasn't helped this year with a lot of talk around age profiling people based off health for COVID, when actually the NHS for years has been talking around biological health, not numerical health. And the ONS itself has some tragic statistics, which is around the life expectancy gap between the most affluent and the least deprived areas of society is 9 years. 9 years of life expectancy gap. Healthy life expectancy gap is 18 years. So if you're making a judgment based on someone because of their age, someone who's 52 literally has the same health as someone who is 70. So, and it all comes down to a variety of different factors. So it's one of the hardest characteristics to actually put an assumption on, and yet it's one of the most widely assumed characteristics that we see there. And probably that is, I've rattled on for long enough, so it's probably a good point to stop and hand over.
I don't think you've rattled on long enough, Stuart, at all. Some really fascinating insights there, and highly relatable. I love the notion of longevity insurance. With 3 kids at university, I might even look into it myself. I ain't retiring anytime soon, that's for sure. Stuart, I'm sure there'll be questions from what you've just said. So if people do want to ask questions, please pop them in the chat or the question bar at the right-hand side, and we'll come to them towards the end. Thanks, Stuart. We'll move on now to Rachael. We always like to have an employer on our webinars, because we've heard the status, we've heard some of the really sharp insights of what the numbers and the trends are telling us. But Rachael, you're at the front end, having to try and implement and deal with some of this stuff in a really large organisation like Electricity Northwest. So really looking forward to hearing what you've got to say on it. Thank you, Rachael.
Thanks, Ian, and thanks, Stuart and Kim. I found what you had to say really interesting, and it's almost as if we've all been joined up with this, because I think I'll be echoing quite a lot of the messages that you've already heard. So that's given me a sense of relief as well, that I think I'm on the right page. That's good. Okay, so just a little bit about Electricity Northwest, just so you can understand what sort of business we are, and help to understand how we work with our people. So Electricity Northwest, we're distribution network operator for the electricity system in the Northwest. We generate the electricity, so we're not people that you pay your bill to, although we are financed from you guys paying your bill, but we're the people who generate that electricity. And in terms of just explaining a little bit about our workforce, I would describe it as we've got 2,000 employees, well, just over 2,000 employees, and it's almost an organisation split into two. So we have half of our colleagues who are in support functions and are usually based in offices or in the depots, but now through COVID are also working from home. And then we have the other half of our colleagues who are actually operational, out in the field doing physical roles. So they're up the poles that you see to get your electricity connected back again, or they're digging holes, going around in vans. And it's quite an important distinction to make, that we do have people who are doing physical roles, because that has an impact obviously upon the age profiling. Okay, so just to dig into that a little bit more deeper, so you can understand when we're talking about being an age-friendly employer, what does that look like for us? So let's say approximately 2,000 employees, Electricity Northwest, of which we have in total 33% of our colleagues are aged 50 plus. So we probably do fit the demographic in terms of, earlier on, Kim, you were explaining about what's the number of people who in the UK are 50 plus workers. Then I think we're probably spot on there, which is good, and it's nice to know that we're in line with that. So just going into a bit more detail around that in terms of female-male split as well, we are largely, well, we're 75% male organisation. And we see there that 79% of our colleagues at 50 plus are male, and we actually do have, quite proudly, 9 colleagues who are over 70 plus, who are actually still operational, working out in the field. So that was a small percentage, but I'm proud of the fact that we do have those colleagues. And just in terms of what roles those people do, before I was talking about the fact that we do have this split of half and half of people who are out in the field, what we see there when I talk about operational and engineering colleagues at 32% and 23% of our 50 plus colleagues, you can see that we do have a lot of people who are doing, they are more of our physical roles, they are based out in the field, they're still, as I say, doing they're going up the electricity pylons and poles. And that's it's important to understand that, because that then sets what do we need to do as an organisation to keep our 50 plus colleagues able to keep working in those roles. So just touch on what we as an organisation believe are the benefits of being an age-friendly employer, and a lot of this echoes what we've heard earlier on. But very much, I think it was interesting, Stuart, you were talking about earlier on about the diversity benefits that come of having people working together who are from different backgrounds and from different ages, of that intergenerational spectrum, and very much we find that as an organisation. So a lot of our colleagues who are 50 plus are really keen on supporting us with our apprentice programme. We have a massive apprentice programme, and we look to buddy up the apprentices with some of the colleagues that are in the latter end of their career, because they're the people that have done this job inside and out, and they can pass this information on much better than anybody else can. And that's been a real benefit for us. And when we've actually done feedback with our apprentices to say, you know, what's been one of the best things about coming to join the organisation, they often reference the fact that they've been buddied up and they have a colleague who really knows what they're doing and can actually help and support them. So that's been a massive benefit to Electricity Northwest. Age diversity for us absolutely supports us on our journey to achieving good customer satisfaction. And I know there's lots of research that talks about this, and particularly we referenced the retail sector previously, and I think we could probably highlight a number of organisations that look to actually specifically target 50 plus workers, because they recognise that it does impact and help positively with customer service. I would absolutely echo that from our perspective. We do a lot of work with out in the communities, our customers. We have what we call our customers with vulnerable needs, and we find that our colleagues, all of our colleagues across the board are very plugged into customer satisfaction, but there is naturally more of an affinity and an empathy that comes from our colleagues that have worked with us for a number of years and can reach out to those customers and really understand what it's like and support their needs. And in terms of just how we bring that to life a little bit further, we also work with strategic partner Age Concern, who help us a lot with the work that we do in the community with our customers, but they also help and support us with internally with colleagues as well. So that's working where we're basically saying it's just good practice to be able to do the same for our colleagues as it is for our customers as well. So it becomes far more part of our DNA. Last point there that I've got is life experience is great experience, and I think Stuart, you were referring to this earlier on as well. It does bring diversity of problem solving, and it just allows us to look at things in a different way from an organisation. So it's absolutely something that's core to us as a business, and we wouldn't take it away from it at all. So moving on to how do we sustain being an age-friendly employer. There's absolutely so much more that I think we could do as an organisation, Electricity North West, but I'm just going to run through quite quickly some of the things that we do, and hopefully this brings to life a little bit the 5 criteria that Kim was talking about before, which we have used as a mantra for us at Electricity North West, and I've added on a couple of extra areas as well. So we've referenced about flexible working opportunities. At Electricity North West, we absolutely support this. We do a lot of part-time working. So that supports people who, in all ranges of life, at whichever stage in the career that you're at. But in particular, we do find that we have people who wanting to go off and help support with looking after grandchildren. So we have part-time working. One of the key things that helps us from a flexible working perspective to support our field-based colleagues is we will have conversations about, do they wish to stop doing things like out of hours work, working at weekends, working in the evenings, because we're a 24/7 organisation, but we recognise that some of our older workers might get to a point in their career that that's not for them anymore. So we actively look to have conversations with those colleagues. So we're still supporting them to do an operational role, but we tailor and adjust it accordingly to meet people's needs. From a recruitment perspective, I would say what we do from a recruitment perspective is to support the whole range of diversity, really. But obviously there is a benefit from being age friendly with this. So we operate blind CVs as an organisation. So personal details are taken off with regards to age. So when CVs come in, it is purely about their ability to be able to do a role, and we match accordingly from that perspective. And we've also done a lot of work with having recruitment champions in place who are specifically the people who recruit within the organisation, and that helps to support and eliminate any forms of bias. And all of those recruitment champions and any hiring managers in the organisation have gone through what I call conscious inclusion training, which we know is unconscious bias everywhere else, but I prefer to call it conscious inclusion because I feel it's got a more positive spin about it. Just touch on quickly from a health perspective, we provide support for operational colleagues on an annual basis. It's optional, but they get opportunity to go and have health MOT, if you like, and that has actually identified throughout a number of years some health challenges for some of our colleagues that we've then been able to work with them, support them, and put into place adjustments accordingly. And I talk about on this slide, I've said that we put reasonable adjustments in place, and then I've said and sensible. And what I mean by this is we're not ruled by just what is legally the right thing to do. We actually are having sensible conversations, and we look to support colleagues accordingly for what works for them, as opposed to what our obligation, I guess, is as an employer. I've also referenced there that we've done quite a bit of work for female colleagues to support for female colleagues going through the menopause, which tends to kind of hit at that 50+ stage, and that's been really well received, and I guess broken a bit of a taboo in some ways, but that helps support as well from a mental well-being perspective. Just skipping through a couple of the next ones, and I'll touch on importantly, I think, about communication and engagement. As an organisation, we are very heavily unionised. We work with four trade union partners, and my personal experience of that has actually been quite enlightening in terms of being able to have conversations and hear about what do we need to do better to support our colleagues. The business is very heavily unionised within the operational area, and so it's a really great opportunity for us to work with the trade unions to hear what could we be doing differently to support all of our colleagues, but in particular as well with the lens on from being supporting 50+ colleagues. They are a good source of information to say what could we be doing differently, what policies might we need to change. We also do a lot to measure some of this in terms of engagement. So we do biannual, what I call a climate survey, where our colleagues get opportunity to tell us about what it feels like to work in the organisation. And very recently what we've done is started to dissect that down into different groupings to help with a diversity lens, because it's anonymous, so people obviously we don't know exactly who's been answering it, but it doesn't help us to be able to dig deeper and understand what we need to change as an organisation. So when we've recently done the dissection to say we've actually put in, what is your age category, and pleasingly we found that we've got 80% of colleagues who had identified themselves as being 50+, who were saying that they were satisfied with the working in the organisation and would actually recommend it to other people. Finally there, just quickly on reward, we do a lot on the pensions piece to support colleagues as they are planning for retirement. So we provide a lot of individual information to people about what their pension's looking like, what could they do to improve that for themselves. We do pre-retirement planning and pre-retirement leave. And pre-retirement leave is where colleagues get opportunity to, I guess, dip their toe in what would it look like to retire, and we support them with so many days off in the year prior to them retiring. We also make a quite big song and dance about our long service awards, and because we have colleagues who have worked with us, as you can imagine, for some 40+ years. So that's one of our best events, I think, in our social calendar from an employee perspective, whereby our CEO and the exec team come along and we invite colleagues who are celebrating a special anniversary in the organisation, and they're treated to dinner, and it's an overnight stay with their partner as well, so they can come along and feel valued by the company, and it's a thank you. Okay, so that's all the stuff that we do, I guess, in a whirlwind tour, and I'd be interested to hear what other companies do as well, because I'm always of the belief that we can do more and we can do better. So just touching on then some of the challenges, and I thought I'd put in this because it's important to recognise that some of this stuff isn't always as easy as we want it to be. What I would say when I was questioning myself what's the difference for us as an organisation by the fact that we do have a really great percentage of people who are 50 plus, is it has sometimes meant for us that we have had a slower programme of change, because we have had to think about the fact that we do have now the 5 generational challenge, which used to be different in terms of, we would ordinarily say there were 3 generations we were looking at, and so that's taken a lot of thought for us as an organisation to think, well, what's the key messages and how do we get people on board with change, and in particular this comes into sharp focus when we think about the future and the fact that there's more digital skills required. We're going on the journey as an organisation that some of the work that we need to do does require new digital skills. We require people working out in the field with technology, smartphones, all sorts of things. And we've had to think long and hard about what's the requirements of different people within the organisation. So it can occasionally be seen as it takes us a long time to get through change, and that can come as a source of frustration. But the way I see it is actually it helps us to embed it better, because we have to think really long and hard about it. Other things that we've had as challenges in the organisation, we have had, because we are operational field based, I've talked about what we do from a health perspective, but we have to be really honest with ourselves, and there is a physical capability challenge for some of the people working out in the field in terms of what jobs they might do. And we have experienced sometimes managers maybe struggling to have some of those difficult conversations around how do they approach that if they recognise someone in their team who might be struggling a little bit, and have almost felt that it's easier to not have that conversation than it is to have it and think about reasonable adjustments. So we've been on a journey with that, and we've done lots of work. I have put there as well, probably mildly controversially, that I think it'd be fair to say for us, for colleagues who have been in the business for maybe a long period of time, there is an increased cost to us just purely from a pensions perspective, and just being very commercial about it, that's a fact, that's what it is. And if we were a makeup of a different organisation and we didn't carry that cost, that would be slightly different for us. I call that out to say that's a fact, but actually referencing the fact that earlier on I talked about customer service and what the benefits are for us as an organisation, those benefits far outweigh any of the challenges that we have. And I think you'll note that on this page alone, I think I was almost kind of struggling to call out some of the challenges, but I thought I'll be a realist and say that we do have some. But on the whole, for us, it's a positive experience, and it's helped us also to think about how do we approach different areas of diversity as an organisation, and what do we need to do to actually get those other areas of diversity into the business. So I'm aware I've spoken a lot there. I'm clearly passionate about the subject, as you can tell. But for us at Electricity North West, we have a very positive experience about being an age-friendly employer, and looking forward to working more so within this networking community about what we can do to continue to improve.
Rachel, that was marvellous. We're all nodding and smiling when you were talking there. It was a tour de force, really, around all the various elements that we were talking about previously, the 5 principles in the framework. Really fantastic practice. I'm sure you're going to get lots of contacts from not just those who are on the call, but my goodness, we will promote this now. And one of the things that we are starting to do with the Charter, this is news to you, Rachel, in terms of the advocates tier, is looking not so much at employers themselves as organisations to recognise as advocates, but looking at individuals with specialist knowledge and experience in particular aspects of good employment, and approaching those people to help mentor others in the network around these issues. And Rachel, I think you've just put yourself on a platform as a mentor around the ageing agenda.
Well, I can always learn. I'm all up for reverse mentoring as well, so that's all.
every mentoring relationship I've had, I've always got more out of it than I've given, I'm sure. That's the way it works. But really, thanks very much. We've got a question here from John Brady, actually, and it touches on some of that transition into retirement. And interesting you're saying about leave. When I worked at Edinburgh City Council an awful long time ago, this is 20 odd years ago, the policy there was in the last 6 months, for the first 3 months of the last 6 months, you worked 4 days a week, and then it was down to 3 days a week before you actually retired. So that was quite progressive even then, I guess. But John was wondering more, as John Woody comes from Greater Sport, so he's looking at the health aspects, about keeping people active and healthy as they move into that retirement transition. And more importantly, I think perhaps nowadays, is avoiding isolation once retired, and that whole mental health and well-being. Is there anything that you do around that, Rachel?
Yeah, so we do quite a bit from just taking us once you have retired, we have a big pensions community. So we do lots of work in terms of providing newsletters to those colleagues, inviting them to take part still in events after they've retired. And I think from the organisation we are, I think people do keep in touch with colleagues once they have retired. So we cover it in that way. In terms of the health piece and leading up to that, it's quite an interesting one, and it is covered as well under something else that we work a lot with, which is under the mental well-being challenge. And we're a firm believer that actually doing a lot of sort of physical activity is great for mental well-being as well for all colleagues. So we support that. We have online portals that our colleagues get access to, and it pushes out messages about keeping fit and healthy and diet tips and all those kind of things as well. So I guess we don't specifically target it to just 50 plus colleagues. It's an ethos that we have for all. Wonderful.
There is another question coming from Andrew, which maybe talks to you too, Rachel, but if Stuart and Kim have got any observations. It's about the physical aspect of work and how you deal with that challenge. Any advice that you would offer about how you approach those physical capability problems? Rachel?
Yeah, so because we go through the health checks, that does identify if there are any particular health conditions, and then give support as well to say, here's things that you can do to help support and look after yourself from a physical perspective. And then we provide a lot of communications going out around how to keep fit and healthy, how to look after yourself. We cover as well communications that go out about just generally, for example, at this time of the year, and what it means to be in the winter, and what you could do to support yourself as you go through that. It does help as well that we have the strategic partners as well. So things like, when I reference that we work with Age Concern, we get a lot of content from them. And the one piece of advice I could say is, if you get strategic partners, just steal with pride all their content, because it's great. Because I would say none of us, although you were saying earlier, Ian, about doing mentoring, none of us are particular experts in this field. Some of it is what's common sense, and common sense is often reaching out to other people outside external support to actually say, what can we do? And so Age Concern have helped us quite a bit with content about keeping fit and healthy and things that you can do.
Wonderful. We'll have a look at the Age Concern website. I'm sure there's got some stuff that we can share further. Amazing. All these conversations go so quickly, and we're almost out of time. But Rachel, I loved your term conscious inclusion rather than unconscious bias. That's something we'll certainly pick up and use. But and interesting about the blind CVs, I often wonder, yes, blind CVs, and we campaign hard about ban the box and that sort of thing, but how blind can a CV be when it's 30 years old of history? So it's maybe something to Kim and Stuart about how do we start to address some of those issues through recruitment. I think Rachel said it's in the DNA, and it's a culture values thing perhaps within Electricity Northwest, but where it's not, in a workplace where that's not present. How do we start promoting that sort of attitude and approach? Any insights? Kim?
Do you want to go?
I mean, I can't tell you the answer to that yet, but we're hoping to be able to. So the first report that we publish will highlight some of the issues, but next year we really want to get underneath that. And again, we're really interested in talking to some new employers as well. So yeah, it's something we've got to get underneath. But it's about conscious bias and subconscious bias, isn't it? We all have our own perceptions. What I'm hoping is we're all getting older ourselves. So actually, you are seeing sort of, particularly with women, an incremental change to the labour market. And I do think that this stuff, we all have to, it has to be a movement, a mass movement, because this sort of stuff takes time. We are not going to change this in 12 months or 2 years, but it'll change over time. I'm quite confident about that.
No, I think age is sadly one of the last socially acceptable forms of prejudice, and yet it's the only form of, one of the few protected characteristics that's going to happen to all of us. We'll all age, right? It's better than the alternative, as Oscar Wilde said. I think the key thing though is it can often feel like an absolute minefield if you've got to worry about a gender diversity policy, an age diversity policy, a ethnicity policy. Actually, if you come at it from the other way and think about it, building an inclusive culture, again, exactly as Rachel was talking about, I love the terminology. If you've got a genuinely inclusive recruitment process and a genuinely inclusive culture, it shouldn't matter what the characteristic is. It will be around making sure you're assessing that person, not that characteristic. And I think that's the simplest way to drive focus, I think.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Rachel. That was a really nice way of wrapping this up, actually. One of the challenges that the Good Employment Charter's had from day one is that, you know, we set out 7 characteristics of what we believe good employment can be, and they do reflect a lot of the things that you've talked about. What isn't specifically spelt out is something around equalities. And that's because we weave it all the way through, or at least we try to. And I think that's the point you're making, Stuart. But it's something that I think we've got to constantly work at to make work. It's not just in a box. It's something that is absolutely, you've got to live and breathe. So we're indebted to all of you for bringing or shining a light onto the age-friendly employment agenda, something we will definitely revisit in future webinars and resources. And please don't be strangers to the Charter. We'll happily promote any of your work or resources. This is the last webinar for 2020. Glad to see the back of the year, and we look to 2021 with some hope. In January, we'll be holding a webinar with a range of partners around financial well-being and how we can support our employees in that sense. We thought after the Christmas spend, that might be a useful thing for everyone to come back and revisit how we can tighten our belts and support our employees moving forward. So without prolonging the afternoon, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for attending, and all the best for Christmas and the New Year. Thanks.